I am David, 35, and my parents chose a fiberglass boat over my 7-year-old daughter's ability to walk. Before I tell you how I ended up owning their house, that boat, and evicting them from the life they loved more than their own family, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. To understand why I did what I did, you have to understand the fear. Real fear isn't a horror movie. Real fear is the smell of antiseptic in a hospital hallway and the look on a doctor's face when he takes off his glasses. I was standing in the corridor of St. Jude's Medical Center, staring at the scuff marks on the linoleum floor. My daughter, Lily, was in the room behind me, sleeping fitfully. She had been born with a congenital condition in her tibia, something we had been monitoring for years. But 3 days ago, she fell on the playground. It wasn't a bad fall. It was just a trip. But when you have bones like hers, a simple trip changes your life. Dr. Carter came out of the room, looking tired. He was a good man, the kind of doctor who didn't look at his watch when you asked questions. But today, he wasn't looking at me with patience. He was looking at me with urgency. "David," he said, his voice low, "we have a window. The fracture has compromised the blood supply to the lower tibia. We need to operate to stabilize the bone and graft the area. If we don't do this within 48 hours, the bone tissue will die. At that point, we aren't talking about repair anymore. We're talking about amputation or a permanent, severe disability. She will limp for the rest of her life." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Okay," I said, my voice cracking. "Let's do it. Schedule it." Dr. Carter hesitated. "We ran your insurance, David. This specific procedure, with the specialist hardware required, it's considered elective under your current plan because it's a reconstruction, not life-saving emergency surgery. The hospital administration needs a deposit. The out-of-pocket cost is $10,000. $10,000. It might as well have been $1 million. I was a landscape architect, but business had been slow, and since my wife passed away 2 years ago, I had been drowning in single-parent costs. My savings were gone. My credit cards were maxed out, keeping the lights on. "I need 48 hours, I told him. "Please, keep her comfortable. I'll get the money." I walked out of that hospital into the blinding afternoon sun. I sat in my beat-up Ford truck, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I didn't have $10,000. I didn't even have 1,000. But I knew people who did. My parents, Robert and Catherine, lived in a gated community called Emerald Hills. It was the kind of place where the grass was manicured with nail scissors and the security guards looked like Secret Service agents. My father had made his money in commercial real estate, and he never let anyone forget it. I drove straight there. I didn't call ahead. You don't make an appointment for an emergency. When I pulled into their driveway, I saw it. Parked right next to my father's Range Rover was a brand new Porsche 911. It was sleek, black, and screamed money. It belonged to Anthony, my brother-in-law. He was married to my older sister, Sarah. They were the golden couple. Sarah had never worked a day in her life, and Anthony was a consultant, which in our family meant he lived off my father's connections and spent money he didn't earn. I parked my rusted truck behind the Porsche, the contrast looking like a bad joke. I took a deep breath, swallowed my pride, and walked to the front door. My mother opened it. She was wearing a silk kaftan that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "David?" she said, looking past me at my dirty truck. "We weren't expecting you. We're having a small celebration." "I need to talk to you and Dad," I said. "It's urgent. It's Lily." Her expression didn't change. She didn't look worried. She looked annoyed. "Well, come in, but be quick. The caterers are setting up." I walked into the living room. It was massive, filled with white furniture that looked like it had never been sat on. My father was standing by the fireplace, holding a crystal glass of scotch. Sarah and Anthony were lounging on the sofa, laughing at something on Anthony's phone. "Well, look who it is," Anthony said, smirking. "The working man. Wipe your boots, Dave. That rug is Persian." I ignored him. I looked straight at my father. "Dad, I need help." My father took a slow sip of his drink. "Help usually means money, David. You know my policy on handouts. You're 35. Stand on your own 2 feet. This isn't for me, I said, my voice shaking. It's Lily. She fell. Her leg. The bone is dying, Dad. The doctor says she needs surgery within 48 hours or she'll be crippled for life. Insurance won't cover the upfront cost. I need $10,000. The room went silent. For a second, I thought I saw a flicker of concern in my mother's eyes. But then she looked at my father. My father sighed. He set his glass down on the mantelpiece. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed, as if I had asked him to pass the salt during a formal dinner. That is unfortunate, he said. Truly. But the timing, David, is impossible. Impossible. I stepped forward. You're worth millions. How is it impossible? We just bought the boat, he said calmly. I stared at him. A boat. The golden years, he said, a smile creeping onto his face. A 50-foot azimuth. We closed on it yesterday. The down payment was substantial, and we have cash flow tied up in the slip fees and the new crew. Our liquid assets are restricted right now. I looked at my mother. Mom? It's Lily, your granddaughter. She's 7. My mother smoothed the fabric of her silk dress. She didn't make eye contact. David, you have to understand. We have budgets. We have plans. If we give you this money, we'd have to delay the christening party for the boat. We've already sent invitations. You're choosing a party over Lily's legs? I shouted. The desperation was turning into rage. Don't raise your voice in this house, my father snapped. This is exactly why you struggle, David. You don't plan. You let emergencies dictate your life. Maybe this is a lesson. A lesson, I whispered. Yes. My mother chimed in, finding her voice. She put on that condescending, soft tone she used when she wanted to sound wise. Adversity builds character, sweetheart. If Lily has a limp, well, a limp will teach her responsibility. It will teach her that the world isn't perfect. It might be good for her to learn to overcome obstacles. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. She's 7. She doesn't need to learn responsibility by being disabled. Sarah laughed from the couch. It was a sharp, ugly sound. Oh, stop being dramatic, David. Disabled. She'll just have a wobble. You always blow things out of proportion to get sympathy. You'll manage. You always figure out some way to scrape by. Anthony chuckled, swirling the ice in his drink. Yeah, Dave. Maybe sell that truck? Though I doubt you'd get $500 for it. I looked at them. My family. My father, proud of his boat. My mother, preaching about character while wearing diamonds. My sister and her husband, mocking my poverty while sitting on furniture they didn't pay for. I will never ask you for anything again, I said. My voice was quiet, deadly calm. Remember this moment. Remember that you chose a boat. Don't be melodramatic, my father said, turning his back to me to pour another drink. Show yourself out. I walked out of that house. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently. That click of the latch was the sound of a bridge burning. I sat in my truck and screamed until my throat was raw. I hit the steering wheel until my hands throbbed. I had failed. I had 40 hours left. I drove back to my small apartment, the one I rented in the industrial part of town. I needed to think. I needed to find something to sell. I looked around my living room. A 5-year-old TV. A second-hand sofa. My laptop was old. Even if I sold everything I owned, I wouldn't get $2,000. I was pacing the floor, running numbers in my head, thinking about which organs I could live without, when there was a knock at the door. I wiped my face, trying to look composed, and opened it. Standing there was Caleb. Caleb was my younger brother, the youngest of the 3 of us. He was 26. While Sarah and I had gone to college, her to study art history on Dad's dime, and me for architecture, Caleb had barely finished high school. He wasn't book smart, but he could fix anything with an engine. He worked as a mechanic at a local garage. He always had grease under his fingernails and smelled like motor oil and old coffee. My parents treated him like a mistake. They never invited him to the fancy dinners. They were embarrassed by his blue-collar job. "Hey, Dave," Caleb said. He looked tired. He was wearing his work coveralls, his name stitched in red thread over the pocket. "I heard." "Heard what?" I asked, stepping back to let him in. "I called Mom to ask about her birthday next week. She was complaining. Said you came over causing a scene about money." Caleb's eyes were kind, worried. "Is it true? About Lily?" I nodded, the exhaustion crashing over me. "Yeah, it's true. She needs surgery, Cal. 10 grand. Or she loses the leg." Caleb didn't ask questions. He didn't preach about budgets. He didn't tell me it was a lesson. He reached into the deep pocket of his greasy coveralls and pulled out a thick, messy stack of cash. It was mostly 20s and 10s, wrapped in a rubber band. He held it out to me. "It's not 10 grand, he said quietly. "It's 800. It's all I have right now." I stared at the money. I knew Caleb lived paycheck to paycheck. "Caleb, I can't take your rent money." "It's not rent money," he said, looking down at his boots. I sold my tools." My heart stopped. "You what?" "I sold my Snap-on chest and the diagnostic scanner to the shop owner. He gave me cash." "Caleb," I choked out, "those tools are your livelihood. You can't work without them." "I can use the shop tools," he shrugged, though I saw the pain in his eyes. He loved those tools. He had saved for years to buy them. They were his pride. "They're crappy and old, but they turn bolts just the same. Take it, Dave. Please. For Lily." I took the money. My hands were shaking. My millionaire parents wouldn't skip a party. But my brother, who barely made minimum wage, had sold his future to help me. "Thank you," I whispered, pulling him into a hug. He smelled like oil and sweat, and it was the best smell in the world. It was the smell of loyalty. "You'll figure the rest out," Caleb said, squeezing my shoulder. "You're the smart one." $800. I was still 9,200 short. But Caleb's sacrifice gave me something else. Clarity. I couldn't give up. I had to go to the one place I promised myself I would never go. Mason. Mason wasn't a bank. He operated out of the back of a pawn shop downtown. He was a loan shark. Everyone knew it. His interest rates were illegal, his methods were brutal, but he had cash. I walked into his office an hour later. It smelled of stale smoke. Mason was a big man with dead eyes. 9,200, I said. "I need it cash. Today." Mason looked me up and down. "You're the landscape guy, right? David." "Yes. I know your dad." Mason grinned, showing yellow teeth. "Rich guy. Big developer. Why isn't he cutting the check?" "That's none of your business," I snapped. "Can you do it or not?" "I can do it," Mason said. He pulled a contract out of a drawer. "But since you have no collateral, your truck is garbage, no offense, the terms are steep. 20% interest. Compounded weekly. First payment due in 7 days. You miss a payment. Well, let's just say I have guys who are very creative with baseball bats." I didn't read the contract. I didn't care about the interest. I cared about the clock ticking in Dr. Carter's head. "Give me the pen," I said. I signed my life away. Mason counted out the bills. I drove straight to the hospital. I slammed the cash down on the administration desk. Caleb's greasy 20s mixed with Mason's crisp hundreds. "Do the surgery," I told them. Lily went into the operating room 2 hours later. I sat in the waiting room for 6 hours, watching the clock. Every minute felt like an hour. When Dr. Carter finally came out, he was smiling. "We got it," he said. "The graft took. Circulation is restored. She's gonna be okay, David. She'll need therapy, but she'll walk. She'll run." I slumped in the chair and wept. Not silent tears. Ugly, heaving sobs. It was relief, pure and simple. But as the anesthesia of relief wore off, the reality set in. I owed a violent man nearly $10,000, with interest piling up every week. My salary barely covered rent and food. I had saved my daughter's leg, but I had put a target on my own back. I brought Lily home 3 days later. She was in a cast, but she was smiling. She didn't know Daddy was terrified every time the phone rang. The first week passed. I scraped together the interest payment by selling my TV and my laptop. I walked into Mason's shop and handed it over. "This is just the juice, Dave," Mason said, counting it. "Principal is still untouched. See you next week." I walked out feeling sick. I was in a hole I couldn't climb out of. I was working double shifts, doing manual labor landscaping during the day, and driving for a delivery app at night using a friend's car because my truck had broken down. I was exhausted. I was broken. And I was angry. Every time I looked at social media, I saw photos of my parents on the golden years. They were drinking champagne. Sarah was posting selfies on the deck. "Living our best life. #blessed. The caption read, "They were living their best life." I was preparing to get my legs broken for saving their granddaughter. I didn't know it then, but the universe has a strange sense of humor. Pushes you to the edge of the cliff, dangling you by your fingertips, just before it decides to either drop you or teach you to fly. It was a Tuesday. I had $5 in my pocket. I needed milk for Lily and painkillers for my back. I stopped at a gas station. I bought the milk. I had $2 left. On a whim, a stupid, desperate whim, I looked at the lottery tickets on the counter. I never played. It was a tax on the poor. But I was poor, and I was desperate. "Give me a mega multiplier," I told the clerk. I scratched it right there on the counter, not expecting anything. I matched the first number, then the second, then the third. I stopped scratching. I looked at the prize amount. I didn't scream. I didn't cheer. I just stopped breathing. The clerk looked at me. "You okay, buddy? You look like you're gonna pass out." I stared at the ticket. $500,000. It wasn't 100 million. It wasn't buy an island money. But to a drowning man, a life raft looks like a luxury yacht. After taxes, it would be about $320,000. It was enough. It was enough to pay Mason. It was enough to buy Caleb his tools back. It was enough to breathe. I walked out of that gas station with the ticket tucked into my inside pocket, right against my heart. I felt lighter, but also colder. The fear was gone, replaced by a sharp, icy clarity. 3 weeks later, the check cleared. The first thing I did was go to Mason. I walked in with a duffel bag. I didn't just bring the interest. I brought the principal and a little extra. "We're done," I said, dumping the cash on his desk. Mason looked surprised, then disappointed. He liked having leverage over people. "You came into some money, Dave? Maybe you want to invest." I said, "We're done." I cut him off. "If you ever come near me or my family again, I'll call the cops. I don't care what you do to me, but I have the means to fight back now." I walked out a free man. The second thing I did was go to the garage where Caleb worked. I didn't tell him about the money yet. I spoke to his boss privately. I bought back every single tool Caleb had sold, plus a brand new, top-of-the-line Snap-on master set. I told the boss to just say an anonymous customer did it. I wanted to see Caleb's face, not have him feel indebted to me. But the third thing I did, that was for me. I hired a lawyer. Not a strip mall lawyer. I hired Julian. Julian was a shark in a three-piece suit. He specialized in forensic accounting and family law. I sat in his glass-walled office, looking out over the city. "I want to protect this money," I told him. "I want to set up a trust for my daughter so no one can ever touch it. And I want to know something else." "What's that?" Julian asked, tapping his pen on his legal pad. "My parents," I said. "They claimed they couldn't help me because their assets were illiquid, but they spend money like water. I want you to look into their finances. I need to know if they were lying or if they are actually broke." Julian raised an eyebrow. "Public records search? Dig deeper," I said. "I'm willing to pay for a full asset investigation." I needed to know. It was a morbid curiosity. Had they refused because they couldn't help, or because they wouldn't? A week later, Julian called me back in. His face was grim. "David," he said, sliding a thick file across the mahogany desk. "You were right to be curious, but it's worse than you think." "Are they broke?" I asked. Technically, yes. They are leveraged to the hilt, Julian explained. The house in Emerald Hills has 3 mortgages on it. The boat, financed with a predatory loan. They are drowning in debt to maintain the appearance of wealth. But that's not the illegal part. My stomach tightened. Illegal? Julian opened the file to a specific page. It was a copy of a bank document. Your grandparents, your father's parents, left a trust fund when they died 10 years ago. It was specifically designated as an educational and medical emergency fund for their grandchildren. You, Sarah, Caleb, and Lily. I knew about the college fund, I said. Dad always said he was managing it for us. He managed it all right, Julian said dryly. He liquidated it. What? 6 months ago. The signature on the authorization form is yours. Or rather, a forgery of yours, and Sarah's, and Caleb's. Julian pointed to the squiggly line at the bottom of the page. Your father forged your signatures, emptied the account, nearly $200,000, and used it as the down payment for the boat. I felt the room spin. He stole Lily's money. To buy the boat that he then claimed prevented him from saving her leg? Exactly, Julian said. He committed fraud, embezzlement, whatever you want to call it. That boat belongs to you, David. To you and your siblings. Morally and legally. I sat back in the leather chair. The rage I felt before was a candle. This was a forest fire. My father hadn't just been selfish. He had stolen the safety net my grandparents left for my daughter. He had looked me in the eye, told me he had no money, while standing on a deck purchased with my daughter's stolen inheritance. Can we sue? I asked. We can, Julian said. We can file charges. He'd go to prison. The assets would be seized by the state to pay creditors. It would be messy, public, and slow. I looked at the city skyline. Prison was too good for him. He would play the victim. He would blame the system. I don't want to just sue him, I said softly. I want to beat him at his own game. Julian leaned forward, intrigued. What do you have in mind? You said he has 3 mortgages. You said the boat is financed with a predatory loan. Who holds that debt? Julian flipped through the pages. The house debt has been bundled and sold to a distressed asset firm. The boat loan is with a private lender. Can I buy it? I asked. Julian paused. He looked at me, really looked at me. With your winnings, you have enough to buy the distressed debt on the house. It's considered toxic debt, so you can buy it for pennies on the dollar. You'd become the bank. You'd become his creditor. Do it, I said. David, Julian warned. This is aggressive. If you own the mortgage and he defaults. He will default, I said. He spends money he doesn't have. When he misses a payment, what happens? If you own the note, Julian smiled, a sharp, predatory smile. You can foreclose. Immediately. Set up a shell company, I commanded. Make it sound corporate and faceless. Buy the debt. And then, let's invite them to negotiate. I wasn't just going to take the money back. I was going to take the roof over their heads. We moved fast. Julian was efficient. Within 48 hours, Phoenix Ventures LLC was born. It was a faceless entity, a ghost in the machine of the financial world. And it was owned 100% by me. We approached the bank holding the toxic debt on my parents' mansion. They were happy to unload it. They saw a high-risk loan on a property that was underwater. I bought the note for $250,000. It took almost all of my winnings, leaving me with just enough to cover Lily's therapy and basic living expenses. It was a gamble. If my father somehow paid up, I'd just be a bank collecting interest. But I knew my father. He didn't pay debts. He serviced appearances. 2 weeks later, Julian sent the notice. Phoenix Ventures LLC was now the holder of the mortgage. And we were calling in a review of the terms due to irregularities in the borrower's credit history. My father must have panicked. Julian told me later that Robert called the office 5 times in 1 hour. He was terrified of foreclosure. It would ruin his image in the Emerald Hills community. Julian set up a meeting. He told my father that the board of directors of Phoenix Ventures was willing to offer a lifeline, a sale and leaseback agreement. Basically, my father would sign the deed of the house over to the company to clear the debt. In exchange, he could continue living there as a tenant, paying rent. It would allow him to keep up the appearance of ownership. No one at the country club would know he didn't own the mansion anymore. It was the perfect bait for a narcissist. The meeting was held in Julian's conference room. I was there, but not in the room. I was in the adjoining office, watching through the blinds, listening via the speakerphone. My parents arrived looking flustered. My father was wearing a suit that was too tight, sweating through his shirt. My mother looked pale. Anthony and Sarah were there too, for moral support, which mostly meant Anthony was checking his watch and looking bored. "Mr. Smith," Julian said, using his professional voice, "Phoenix Ventures is willing to acquire the property. We will clear the outstanding mortgage balance. You will sign a lease for $5,000 a month. You stay in the home. Your social standing remains intact." "It's a generous offer," my father said, trying to sound authoritative but failing. "We have had some cash flow timing issues. This bridge arrangement suits us until my next big deal closes." There was no next big deal. I knew that. Julian knew that. "There is one condition," Julian said, sliding the contract across the table. "The board is very strict about compliance. This is a zero-tolerance lease. Clause 14. My father squinted at the paper. "Zero tolerance? If you are late on the rent by even 1 minute," Julian explained, "or if there is any violation of the property maintenance code, or, and this is key, if there is any evidence of further financial insolvency, the lease terminates immediately. No grace period. No eviction court delays. You agree to vacate within 24 hours. "That's harsh," Anthony piped up. "Who puts that in a lease?" "A company that is saving your in-laws from public bankruptcy," Julian shot back. "Take it or leave it. If you leave it, we foreclose tomorrow. The sheriff will put a padlock on the door by Friday." My mother grabbed my father's arm. "Robert, think of the neighbors. Think of the christening party for the boat. We can't be evicted." "We'll take it," my father said quickly. He pulled out his Mont Blanc pen, probably bought with my money, and signed. He didn't read the rest of the contract. If he had, he might have noticed that the signatory for Phoenix Ventures was listed as D. Miller, my last name, but he was too busy saving his ego. They signed. They smiled. They shook Julian's hand. "Please thank the board for us," my mother said, regaining her composure. "We are excellent tenants." I watched them leave, high-fiving each other in the elevator lobby. They thought they had tricked a corporate giant. They thought they had bought time. They had just signed their own warrant. Now all I had to do was wait. I knew Anthony. I knew he handled the bills for my parents now that Dad was getting older. And I knew Anthony was incompetent. I didn't have to wait long. 3 weeks later, the rent was due. It was the 1st of the month. The electronic transfer was scheduled. But I saw the notification on my banking app. Transaction failed. Insufficient funds. I called Julian immediately. "What happened?" Julian did a quick check. "It looks like the account they use for bills was drained yesterday. A large withdrawal at a casino. Anthony had taken the rent money to the casino, hoping to double it, and lost it all. My father didn't know. He thought the rent was paid. It was 12:01 a.m. on the 2nd of the month. They were technically in default. I could have evicted them right then. But I waited. I wanted the timing to be poetic. The boat christening party was scheduled for that Saturday. They were going to unveil the golden years to all their rich friends. They were going to celebrate their stolen wealth. "Julian," I said, "prepare the eviction notice. But don't serve it yet. Meet me at the marina on Saturday. Bring the police." "David," Julian said, sounding worried, "this is going to be a scene." "Yes," I said, "it is." Saturday arrived. It was a beautiful sunny day, perfect weather for a boat party. I put on my best suit. It was the only suit I owned, the one I wore to funerals. I drove to the marina. I saw the boat from the parking lot. It was massive, gleaming white with gold lettering. The golden years. Balloons were tied to the railing. Waiters were passing out champagne. I saw my parents on the upper deck holding court. My mother was laughing, throwing her head back. My father was smoking a cigar, pointing at the horizon like he owned the ocean. Sarah and Anthony were there, showing off the Porsche in the parking lot before walking up the gangplank. I walked toward the boat. I wasn't limping. My daughter was at home with Caleb, safe, healing. I was walking tall. I walked up the gangplank. The security guard tried to stop me. "Sir, is your name on the list?" "I don't need to be on the list," I said loud enough for people to hear. "I own the boat." The security guard looked confused, his hand hovering over his radio. "Excuse me? Let him through." A voice boomed from the upper deck. It was my father. He was looking down at me, his face a mixture of annoyance and amusement. "Let my son come up. He probably came to apologize." The crowd parted as I walked onto the main deck. It was a sea of linen suits and designer dresses. I saw neighbors I had grown up with, business associates of my father, people who judged worth by the size of a bank account. I climbed the stairs to the upper deck. The music, a live jazz band, faded as people noticed the tension. "David," my mother said, stepping forward with a tight, fake smile. "We didn't think you'd come. Did you fix your financial situation?" Sarah giggled behind her hand. "Did you sell the truck, Dave? Or are you here to ask for leftovers?" Anthony chimed in, leaning against the railing. "Hey, if you need cash, I have a 20 in my pocket. You can wash the Porsche for me later." Laughter rippled through the guests. My father took a puff of his cigar. Now, let's be charitable. David, if you're here to make amends for your outburst last month, we accept. We are a forgiving family." I stood there, looking at them. The anger I expected to feel wasn't there. Instead, I felt a cold, hard satisfaction. "I'm not here to apologize, Dad," I said. My voice was steady, carrying over the quiet deck. "And I'm not here for leftovers." "Then why are you here?" my father asked, his eyes narrowing. "To embarrass us?" "No," I said. "I'm here to inspect my property." "Your property?" My father laughed, a booming, confident sound. "Have you been drinking, son? This boat cost $500,000. You couldn't afford the dinghy." "Actually," I said, reaching into my jacket pocket, "I can. Because you bought it with my money." The crowd murmured. My mother's smile faltered. "David, stop this nonsense immediately." "Julian," I called out. Julian stepped onto the deck from the stairs behind me. He was followed by 2 uniformed police officers and a sheriff's deputy. The silence on the boat was absolute. "Who is this?" my father demanded, stepping back. "Officers, remove these people. This is a private party." "Mr. Robert Miller," Julian said, his voice projecting clearly. "I am Julian Thorne, attorney for Phoenix Ventures, LLC. My father's face went white. "Phoenix? Wait, we have a deal. We have a lease." "You had a lease," Julian corrected. "As of 12:01 a.m. on the 1st of the month, you are in default. Payment was not received." "That's impossible," my father stammered. "Anthony pays the bills." "Anthony?" He turned to look at Anthony. Anthony was suddenly very interested in his shoes. He started backing away toward the stairs. "Anthony?" my mother shrieked. I transferred it." Anthony lied, his voice high and panic-stricken. "It must be a bank error." "It wasn't an error," Julian said calmly. "The funds were withdrawn at the Golden Palace Casino. We have the bank records." The crowd gasped. My sister Sarah looked at her husband with horror. "Regardless," Julian continued, "under Clause 14 of your contract, the lease is terminated. Phoenix Ventures is exercising its right to immediate possession of the residence." "You can't do that," my father yelled. "I'll sue you. I'll talk to the owner." I took a step forward. "You're talking to him, Dad." My father froze. "What?" "Phoenix Ventures," I said. "It's me. I'm the owner." I bought your debt. I own the mortgage on the house. And thanks to the cross-collateralization clause you signed without reading, I own this boat too." My mother put a hand to her chest, swaying. "David? You?" "Yes," I said. "I won the lottery, Mom. The same week you told me a limp would teach Lily responsibility. I had enough money to walk away, to go live my life and never see you again." "Then why?" my father whispered, the cigar falling from his fingers. "Why do this?" "Because you stole from her," I said, my voice rising. I pulled the papers Julian had prepared out of my pocket. "The trust fund. Grandma and Grandpa's money. You forged my signature. You forged Caleb's. You forged Sarah's. You stole $200,000 from your own children and grandchildren to buy this." I gestured to the boat. "That's a lie," my father roared. "It's not a lie, sir." One of the police officers stepped forward. "We have the forensic report. We have the warrant." "Warrant?" My father looked at the handcuffs on the officer's belt. "Grand larceny and fraud," the officer said. "Robert Miller, you are under arrest." My mother started screaming. It was a raw, ugly sound that shattered the polite atmosphere of the marina. "No, you can't. We are pillars of this community." "You're thieves," I said cold. "You stole from a 7-year-old girl who needed surgery. You let your grandson sell his tools to fix your mistakes. You mocked me for being poor while you were spending my money." I turned to the guests. They were staring, mouths open, drinks forgotten. "The party is over," I announced. "Everyone needs to disembark. Now, this vessel is seized evidence." The humiliation was total. The friends my parents had spent a lifetime impressing scrambled for the exit. They didn't look at my parents. They looked at the floor, at their phones, anywhere but at the ruin of the Miller family. Anthony tried to slip away in the chaos. "Not you," I said, pointing at him. "And not the Porsche." Anthony froze. "The car is in my name." "Actually," Julian interjected smoothly, "the car is leased under the family holding company, which was used as collateral for the house. Since the house is in default, the assets of the holding company are frozen. Give me the keys, Anthony." Anthony looked at Sarah. Sarah looked at me, tears streaming down her face. "David, please," she sobbed. "We didn't know about the trust fund. Dad handled everything. You knew I needed money for Lily," I said to her. "And you laughed. You told me I'd manage. Well, Sarah, figure it out. You'll manage." Anthony threw the keys on the deck with a curse. The police handcuffed my father. He looked small. He looked old. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a terrified confusion. "David," he pleaded as they led him away. "I'm your father." "I know," I said. "That's the only reason I'm not pressing charges against Mom too. Yet." I watched them drag him down the gangplank. My mother was running after them, wailing. Anthony and Sarah were standing on the dock, arguing, their ride gone, their house gone. I stood alone on the deck of the Golden Years. I looked out at the water. This is the moment that changed everything. The moment I finally took back control of my life. The aftermath wasn't quiet. It was a landslide. Once the first domino fell, the arrest on the boat, the rest of my parents' fake empire collapsed within days. The news spread through Emerald Hills like wildfire. The pillars of the community were exposed as frauds who stole from their own grandchildren. I didn't stay on the boat. I had the police seal it. I didn't want it. It was tainted. The next day, I went to the mansion with the sheriff to oversee the eviction. My mother was there, packing boxes frantically. She looked 10 years older than she had the day before. Her makeup was smeared, her hair messy. When she saw me, she didn't yell. She dropped to her knees. "David," she wept, grabbing my hand. "Please, don't do this. Where will we go? Your father is in jail. I have no money. You can't throw your mother on the street." I looked down at her. Part of me, the part that used to be a little boy who wanted his mommy to love him, wanted to help, wanted to write a check to fix it. But then I thought of Dr. Carter's face. I thought of Caleb's dirty hands handing me $800. I thought of the responsibility she preached about. You have Sarah, I said, pulling my hand away. And Anthony. They left, she sobbed. Anthony took what cash was left in the safe and ran. Sarah is staying with a friend, but she says she has no room for me. Of course, the rats were fleeing the sinking ship. I'm not throwing you on the street, Mom, I said. I'm teaching you responsibility. You lived beyond your means. You stole. Now you have to deal with the consequences. But the house. She looked around at the grand foyer. I'm selling the house, I said. The proceeds will go to pay back the creditors you stiffed. And the money from the boat? That goes back into the trust fund for Lily and Caleb. Caleb? She spat the name out, a flash of her old self returning. Why does he get anything? He's just a mechanic. He's the only decent man in this family, I said. And he's the only one of us who isn't going to be homeless today. He has a rental. Maybe ask him? Oh wait, you treated him like garbage for 20 years. Good luck with that. I signaled the movers. Clear it out. My father made bail 2 days later. He used a bail bondsman, putting up his watch and his wedding ring as collateral. He came to see me at my apartment. He looked broken. The suit was wrinkled. He smelled like sweat and fear. Drop the charges, David, he said. It wasn't a command anymore. It was a beg. If you testify against me, I'll go to prison for 5 years. At my age, that's a life sentence. I stood in the doorway, blocking him from entering. Lily was inside watching cartoons. I didn't want his shadow touching her. I won't testify, I said. Hope flared in his eyes. Thank you. I knew you were reasonable. I knew. I won't testify, I repeated. If you sign this. I handed him a document Julian had drawn up. What is it? It's a full confession and a surrender of all parental rights to the trust fund, I said. And it's a restraining order. You stay away from me, from Caleb, and from Lily. Forever. You move to another state. You disappear. David. If you don't sign, I said. I hand the recordings of the sale and leaseback meeting to the DA. The ones where you admitted to the financial fraud to get the lease. You'll get 10 years, not 5. He stared at me with hatred. Pure, unadulterated hatred. But he took the pen. He signed. You're a cruel man, David. He spat. I learned from the best, I replied. Goodbye, Robert. He walked away, an old man with nothing left but his pride, and even that was tattered. The house sold quickly. The market in Emerald Hills was hot. I sold it for less than it was worth just to unload it fast. I paid off the mortgages. I paid off the creditors. When the dust settled, there was about $400,000 left from the sale of the house and the boat. I took half of it and put it into an irrevocable trust for Lily. She would have college paid for. She would have a safety net. The other half, I called Caleb. Hey, Dave, Caleb answered. I heard about everything. Is it true? Dad's gone. Yeah, Cal, it's done. Mom called me, Caleb said. She wanted to sleep on my couch. I told her no. I told her I didn't have room because my tools take up too much space. He chuckled nervously. Good man, I smiled. Hey, meet me at the old warehouse on 5th Street, the abandoned one. Why? Just come. When Caleb arrived, I was standing in front of the building. It was an old brick structure, dusty and boarded up. What are we doing here? Caleb asked, getting out of his beat-up sedan. I tossed him a set of keys. Open it. Caleb unlocked the padlock on the chain-link fence and then the side door. We walked into the dark, cavernous space. I flipped the breaker switch. The overhead lights hummed to life. Caleb gasped. The warehouse wasn't empty. I had spent the last week equipping it. There were 3 brand new hydraulic lifts. There were rows of gleaming red tool chests. Snap-on, Matco, the best money could buy. There was a paint booth in the corner. There was a neon sign leaning against the wall that read, C&L Auto Repair. What is this? Caleb stammered. C stands for Caleb, I said. L stands for Lily. But since she's 7 and can't change a transmission, I figure you're the boss. Dave, Caleb was shaking. This is 100 grand worth of gear. Actually, it's 200, I corrected. And I bought the building. No rent. You own it. Free and clear. Caleb fell to his knees on the concrete floor. He put his face in his hands and started to cry. You gave me $800 when you had nothing, I said, my voice thick with emotion. You saved my daughter. You saved me. This is just interest, brother. I walked over and put a hand on his shoulder. You're not the mechanic anymore, Cal. You're the owner. This was justice. My parents had chosen a boat over family. I chose family over money. And in the end, I got both. 6 months. That is how long it takes for a broken bone to fully knit, for a season to change from winter to summer, and for a life to completely reinvent itself. The warehouse on 5th Street wasn't just a building anymore. It was a beacon. I parked my truck, a new one this time, a sturdy, reliable heavy-duty pickup that I bought with cash, in the lot of C and L Auto Repair. It was a Tuesday morning, but the lot was already full. There were sedans, SUVs, and even a few high-end sports cars waiting for service. The air smelled of coffee and clean solvent. The grinding sound of an air wrench whirring in the distance was music to my ears. I walked into the reception area. It wasn't the greasy, magazine-strewn waiting room of Caleb's old job. This place was clean. There were comfortable chairs, a pot of fresh coffee, and a wall of framed certifications. And behind the front desk, answering the phone with a confidence I had never heard before, was Caleb. He wasn't wearing dirty coveralls. He was wearing a clean polo shirt with the company logo embroidered on the chest. He looked 5 years younger. The dark circles under his eyes were gone, replaced by a spark of energy. C and L Auto, this is Caleb, he said into the headset, typing on a computer. Yes, Mr. Henderson. We finished the transmission rebuild on the Jaguar. It's purring like a kitten. You can pick it up at 4. All right. Thank you. He hung up and looked at me, a grin spreading across his face. Hey, silent partner. Checking up on your investment. Just coming to get some free coffee, I joked, pouring myself a cup. Business looks good. Good. Caleb laughed, coming around the desk to shake my hand. His grip was firm. We're booked out 3 weeks, Dave. I hired 2 more mechanics yesterday. Good guys. Veterans who needed a break. I'm paying them $5 over the industry standard. That cuts into your margin, I noted, the protective older brother in me surfacing. It buys loyalty, Caleb corrected me. And it buys quality. You taught me that. You get what you pay for. Dad always wanted the cheapest labor, the cheapest parts, and look where he is. I want the best. I smiled. He had learned. He wasn't just fixing cars, he was building a culture. How's the leg? Caleb asked, nodding at my knee. I had tweaked it playing soccer with Lily the day before. It's fine, I said. How's the other situation? Caleb's smile faded slightly. He knew what I meant. The fallout. Sarah came by yesterday, he said quietly. I stiffened. Here? To the shop. Yeah. She parked that old Honda she bought around the block. Probably didn't want me to see it. She came in wearing sunglasses, trying to look like a customer. What did she want? A job, Caleb said. He leaned back against the desk, crossing his arms. She asked if I needed a receptionist. Said she has managerial experience from organizing Dad's parties. I let out a harsh laugh. You're kidding. I wish I was. She stood right there, he pointed to the spot on the tile floor, and told me that since I was family, I owed her a position. She said it was embarrassing that her little brother was a business owner while she was working retail. What did you tell her? Caleb looked at the wall where a picture of Lily hung. I told her we were fully staffed. I told her that this shop is built on trust and hard work, and she doesn't have a track record of either. She must have loved that, I said. She started screaming. Caleb shrugged. Called me ungrateful. Said Dad made me. I just let her yell. Then I asked her if she wanted me to call security. She left. I looked at my brother. The boy who used to apologize for taking up space was gone. In his place was a man who knew his worth. "I'm proud of you, Cal," I said. "Not because of the money. Because of that. It felt necessary," he said. Closure. I left the shop feeling lighter. Caleb was going to be fine. He was thriving. But there was another stop I had to make. It was time for Lily's final checkup with Dr. Carter. I picked her up from school. She was running toward me across the playground. Running. Not walking. Not hobbling. Running. There was a slight, almost imperceptible difference in her gait. A tiny hesitation in her rhythm. But to anyone else, it was invisible. To me, it was a miracle. "Daddy!" she yelled, jumping into my arms. I swung her around, holding her tight. She felt solid, strong. At the hospital, Dr. Carter examined the x-rays. He put them up on the light board next to the ones from 6 months ago. The difference was stark. The bone was dense, white, and whole. The graft had integrated perfectly. "It's a textbook recovery," Dr. Carter said, taking off his glasses. "Better than textbook, actually. She has full range of motion. No pain." "No pain," Lily chirped, swinging her legs on the exam table. "I beat Tommy in a race today." Dr. Carter smiled at me. "You made the right call, David. If you had waited, if you hadn't done the surgery when you did." He trailed off, shaking his head. "Well, let's just say she wouldn't be racing anyone." I nodded, a lump in my throat. I thought about the $10,000. It seemed like such a small number now compared to the life it had purchased. "Thank you, doctor," I said, "for everything." Leaving the hospital, I felt a need to close the final loop. I had seen Caleb rise. I had seen Lily heal. But I hadn't let myself see the reality of what happened to the others. I had avoided it, letting Julian handle the paperwork and the restraining orders. But to truly move on, I needed to see the ghost. I drove to the south side of the city. It wasn't a slum, but it was a far cry from Emerald Hills. It was a neighborhood of peeling paint, chain-link fences, and overgrown lawns. I pulled up to the address Julian had given me. It was a small, dingy duplex with a cracked driveway. A rusted sedan sat in the front yard. I didn't get out of the truck. I rolled down the window and waited. 10 minutes passed. Then the front door opened. My father stepped out. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing gray sweatpants and a stained t-shirt. He looked smaller, shrunken. His hair, usually dyed a rich chestnut, was completely white and thinning. He shuffled to the mailbox, opening it with shaking hands. He pulled out a stack of envelopes. Bills. I could tell by the way his shoulders slumped. He looked up then, scanning the street. His eyes locked onto my truck. I didn't look away. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just watched him. Recognition dawned on his face. He took a step forward, his mouth opening as if to shout something. Anger? A plea? I didn't care. Then the door opened again. My mother came out. She was wearing a bathrobe, looking disheveled. She saw me too. She grabbed my father's arm, pulling him back. She pointed at me, saying something frantic. I saw fear in their eyes. Not regret. Fear. They were afraid I was there to take more. They didn't understand that they had nothing left to take. I put the truck in gear. I didn't rev the engine. I didn't flip them off. I just drove away. As I turned the corner, I felt the last knot in my chest loosen. They weren't monsters under my bed anymore. They were just two sad, old people living in the consequences of their own choices. They were irrelevant. I drove home, but I took the scenic route, passing by the downtown area. I stopped at a red light next to a valet stand for a high-end steakhouse. I saw a familiar figure jogging to retrieve a white Mercedes. It was Anthony. He was wearing a red vest that was too tight, sweating as he ran for the keys. The owner of the Mercedes, a young guy in his 20s, snapped his fingers at him. "Hustle, buddy," the guy said. "I'm in a hurry." "Yes, sir," Anthony mumbled, bowing his head. "Right away, sir." Anthony, who used to sneer at waiters. Anthony, who mocked my truck. Anthony, who stole rent money to gamble. He was now hustling for tips from men half his age. The light turned green. I drove on. That night, I sat on my porch. My house wasn't a mansion. It was a 3-bedroom ranch in a quiet neighborhood. But it was mine. Paid for. No debt. No lies. I opened my laptop and checked the trust fund account. The balance was steady, growing slowly with interest. Lily's future was secure. Caleb's future was secure. I thought about the journey, the panic in the hospital, the shame of asking for help, the grease on Caleb's money, the lottery ticket, the cold fury of the eviction. Felt like a different life. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah. David, please, I know you saw Caleb. I know you have money. I'm about to lose my apartment. I have nowhere to go. Mom and Dad won't let me stay with them because they blame Anthony for the rent default. I'm all alone. Just alone. $5,000. I promise I'll pay it back. I stared at the screen. $5,000. The exact amount I had asked for. The number that started it all. I typed a reply. You're young, Sarah. You'll manage. Adversity builds character. I hit send. Then I blocked the number. It wasn't cruelty. It was the truth. They had taught me that lesson after all. I was just returning the favor. The next morning I went back to work. Not as a vindictive billionaire, but as a landscape architect. I took a contract to design a community garden for the city. I didn't need the money, but I needed the work. I needed to create something beautiful to balance out the destruction I had caused. Caleb came by the site around lunch. He brought sandwiches. We sat on a stack of lumber, eating in the sun. I heard you blocked Sarah, Caleb said, taking a bite of his turkey sub. She told you? She called the shop again, trying to get me to relay a message. I blocked her too. We ate in silence for a moment. It was a comfortable silence. Do you think we went too far? Caleb asked suddenly. With Mom and Dad? With the eviction? I put down my sandwich. I looked at the dirt on my boots. Caleb, do you remember when you were 10? And you broke your arm falling out of the tree? Yeah. Caleb winced. Hurt like hell. Do you remember what Dad did? Caleb frowned, thinking back. He finished his round of golf. Mom drove me to the ER 3 hours later. Exactly, I said. And do you remember what he said when he got home? Caleb's face hardened. He said I was clumsy and that the ER bill was coming out of my allowance. They didn't just fail us recently, Cal, I said softly. They failed us every day for 30 years. They trained us to think we were burdens. They trained us to think love was transactional. Taking the house wasn't revenge. It was stopping the cycle. If we hadn't stopped them, they would have drained that trust fund to zero. Lily would have nothing. You would be working for minimum wage until you died. Caleb nodded slowly. Yeah, you're right. It's hard to turn off the guilt. That guilt is what they installed in you, I said. It's a button they press whenever they need something. Uninstall it. Caleb smiled. A genuine, bright smile. Uninstalled. Good, I said. Now help me move these pavers. I'm old and my back hurts. We worked together for the rest of the afternoon, lifting stones, sweating, laughing. 2 brothers building something solid, stone by stone. A few weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from the state prosecutor's office. My father had violated the terms of his probation. Apparently, he had tried to open a credit card using a stolen identity. A neighbor in his new duplex. He was caught immediately. Because of his prior conviction for the trust fund fraud, even though I hadn't testified, the paper trail was enough for a plea deal. The judge wasn't lenient this time. He was sentenced to 2 years in minimum security prison. I didn't go to the sentencing. I didn't visit. I heard about it from Julian. Your mother is petitioning for state assistance, Julian told me over the phone. She's applying for subsidized housing. Does she qualify? I asked. Ideally, yes. She has 0 assets. Good, I said. Then the system will take care of her. That's what it's there for. I hung up. I felt Nothing. No joy. No sadness. Just a quiet confirmation that justice is a slow, grinding wheel, but it does turn. Lily's birthday was coming up. She was turning 8. I decided to throw a party. Not a golden years party. A real party. I invited Caleb and his mechanics. I invited Dr. Carter and his family. I invited Julian. I invited the neighbors who had been kind to us when we were struggling. We held it in the backyard. I fired up the grill. There were burgers, hot dogs, and a cooler full of cheap soda and beer. There was no jazz band, just a Bluetooth speaker playing 80s rock. There were no waiters, just us. I watched Lily running around the yard with the other kids, playing tag. She was it. She was chasing a boy twice her size, and she was gaining on him. She tagged him, laughing, her face flushed with joy. "You're it!" she screamed. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Caleb. He handed me a beer. "She's fast," he said. "Yeah," I said, my eyes tearing up. "She is. Worth every penny," Caleb said. "Worth every tool. Worth everything," I agreed. I looked around the yard. This was wealth. Not the boat. Not the mansion. Not the Porsche. Wealth was the sound of my daughter laughing. Wealth was my brother standing next to me, secure and happy. Wealth was the freedom to answer the phone without fear. I had walked through fire to get here. I had become someone I didn't know I could be. I had been ruthless. I had been cold. But as I watched Lily run, I knew I would do it all again. I would be the villain in my parents' story 1,000 times over to be the hero in hers. 3 years have passed since the day I walked onto that boat. Life has settled into a rhythm that is beautifully boring. Caleb's shop, C&L Auto, is now the premier garage in the county. He opened a second location last month. He's dating a nice girl, a teacher, who loves that he comes home smelling like oil. He bought a house 2 streets over from mine. We have Sunday dinner every week. Lily is 10 now. She plays soccer. She's a striker. She's aggressive, fast, and fearless. When she scores a goal, she doesn't look at the crowd for applause. She looks at me, and I am always there. My father is still in prison. He writes letters sometimes. I don't open them. I put them in a box in the attic. Maybe one day Lily will want to read them, to understand where she came from. But not today. My mother lives in a small apartment downtown. I send her a grocery store gift card once a month, anonymously. It's not forgiveness. It's basic humanity. I don't visit. I don't call. Some toxicities you can't filter out, you just have to cap the well. Sarah and Anthony divorced. Anthony moved to Vegas, chasing another get-rich-quick scheme. I heard he's driving a taxi. Sarah works as a receptionist at a dental office. We ran into each other at the mall once. She looked tired. We nodded at each other, like strangers who share a forgotten memory, and kept walking. I still have the majority of the lottery money invested. I live off my income from landscaping. I realized that money doesn't solve problems. It just magnifies who you really are. If you are selfish, money makes you a monster. If you are kind, money makes you a benefactor. If you are broken, money just buys you better masks. I think back to that moment in the hospital hallway. The moment I decided to stop waiting for someone to save me. We are raised to believe that family is a sacred bond that cannot be broken. We are told to honor our parents, to stand by our siblings, to endure abuse because blood is thicker than water. That is a lie. The full quote is actually, "The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb." The bonds we choose, the friends who become brothers, the family we build through action and sacrifice, are stronger than the genetics we are born into. My parents shared my DNA, but they were strangers to my heart. Caleb shared my struggle, and he became my savior. I often look at the scar on Lily's leg. It's a thin white line, barely visible now. It's a map of our journey. It reminds me that we all have a choice. When the world tells you no, when the people who are supposed to protect you turn their backs, when you are standing on the edge of the abyss with $5 in your pocket, you have a choice. You can jump, or you can build a bridge. I built a bridge out of a winning lottery ticket, a ruthless legal strategy, and the grease from my brother's hands. I crossed it and I burned it behind me, and from the ashes we grew a garden. I'm sitting here now in my home office, writing this down. Lily is in the next room practicing her violin. Badly, I might add, but I love every squeaky note. Caleb is coming over later to help me fix the deck. This is peace. It's not the peace of ignorance. It's the peace of a soldier who has hung up his sword. I know what I am capable of. I know that if anyone ever threatens my family again, the monster isn't gone. He's just sleeping, and he sleeps with one eye open. But for now, I am just David. I am a father. I am a brother. And I am free. If you've listened this far, thank you. This story wasn't easy to tell. It forced me to relive the darkest moments of my life, but I shared it because I know I'm not alone. There is a powerful lesson here about financial boundary setting and toxic loyalty. Many of us are held hostage by the idea that we owe our toxic family members our resources, our mental health, and our future. We don't. My parents used money as a weapon to control, to shame, and to manipulate. They thought their wealth gave them the right to dictate my worth. But the moment I stopped seeking their validation and started protecting my own circle, their power vanished. The most important takeaway is this: you are the CEO of your own life. You have the right to fire toxic board members, even if they share your last name. You have the right to audit your relationships. If someone is withdrawing more love and energy than they are depositing, they are bankrupting your soul. Cut them off. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to make the hard choice to cut off a family member to save yourself or your children? Or maybe you've been the Caleb in someone's life. Leave a comment below with the word freedom if you believe that peace is worth more than appearance. Or tell me your story. I read every single one. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you feel the anger and the joy, please hit that like button and subscribe. It helps more people find these stories of justice and redemption. Until next time, keep walking tall. You'll manage. You always do.